Welcome to the Wealth Across Generations podcast. Hello and welcome to the Wealth Across Generations podcast, the podcast where families learn to thrive at all levels and grow together. Here we explore ideas and answers to how families can be successful, happy, emotionally intelligent, and resilient. I'm your host, David Allen. Life is not a sprint. It's a marathon. Ever hear that? It's memorable because it's true. We can all relate to things that take a long time, like finishing school, working a job, or building anything that takes many days. Building human capital, or developing any of the other 8 forms that we talked about in episode 2, take time. Building a culture, whether that's acting or thinking according to our ideal version of ourselves, or passing on values we care about to the next generation, we have to take the long-term view of things. In fact, James Hughes talks about this in Family Wealth, Keeping It in the Family, where family wealth is built by a family making more good decisions than bad over the course of 100 years. How does it feel to know that the journey you are on right now, whenever you began taking these ideas seriously, is longer than your lifespan? It should do at least 2 things. First, it should humble you. Most of the achievements your family will make won't be because of you, no matter how good you may be. And second, it should allow you to have grace with yourself. You're not required to set every record and break every chain in just a year or 2. You can't. And even if you could, and your IQ is over 200, there's always regression to the mean, and your children have to know how to carry forward your legacy and create their own with a different set of tools than you've had. Which brings us to the marathon of life. A marathon is 26.2 miles. That's a long way on foot, no matter who you are. If the journey from nothing to a sustainable success can be visually adapted to a line on a whiteboard that represents 26.2 miles, each and every one of us is somewhere on that line. If you're already successful, and some of my listeners are very successful people, they are somewhere on that line in a different part of their lives, whether it's health, relationships, their skill at playing the piano, whatever. Now in your mind's eye, I bet you pictured that whiteboard with the 0 miles marker on the far left of the board. Thank you for thinking so well of humanity. But I'm going to go full Lemony Snicket on you here. Some people's lives are dreary, terrible, and you'd probably rather watch a movie about a happy little elf than take a peek into their lives. Let's put that 0 mile marker right in the middle of our whiteboard, and on the far left we will put negative 26.2 miles. This is the marathon of life. This episode is all about the things we can do or stop doing to help us better move forward on the marathon of a successful life, whatever that looks like for you. In episode 4, we talked about boundaries. Oftentimes, the boundaries we set will be with people whose attitudes, habits, and way of interacting with us would move us backwards on the line, whether it's a manager who feels threatened by your talent, or the jealous female friends who are all divorced and want to give a little relationship advice for you regarding your husband. Good decisions, in part, are about not allowing other people to move us backwards on the line, even though we can't dodge every setback. Here's an example of being very far into the negative on the marathon of life. I've often told friends that I believe the worst time and place to be born a man was between 1900 and 1920 in Russia. Think about it. World War I, the Russian Revolution, World War II, Stalin, the Gulag Archipelago. If you were born in 1900 St. Petersburg and you made it to 1953, I salute you. But not everyone in Russia had it so bad. Yuli Borisovich Briner was born in Vladivostok, Russia in 1920. That's in the east of Siberia. Yuli moved with his family to France, then on his own to America, just in time for regular broadcast television, where he became known as Yul Brynner, one of the most legendary actors in the world. He studied under the renowned acting teacher Michael Chekhov. And while his early life certainly had some ups and downs, his journey on the marathon of life looked considerably different from most of his contemporaries in the Soviet Union. And here we start to see how things can affect where we start on the marathon of life. Such things as, what is our personality like, and do we live in an environment where that personality type is accepted and nurtured? Or have we felt like a square peg, shoved into round holes all our lives? Is our race and ethnicity persecuted? Or do we have a lot of cultural baggage and social pressure attached to it? Or are we free of such hang-ups? What are our talents, and when did we discover these talents? Were we in a position to develop those talents, and does society reward them? Does your country recognize the individual freedom to start a business, make something creative, speak your mind, or at least allow you to move to a place that does? What is your basic health condition, and how much resources and attention does your health need in order to be competitive in the world you live in compared to other people? Is your family rich or poor? Do they have a wealthy or poor mindset? What about your adverse childhood experience score? Have you been punished for things you can't understand? Yelled at on a regular basis? Physically abused or worse by a caregiver? Did you have a developmental disorder starting out? Was anyone able to recognize it and help you learn to navigate life despite that difficulty? Did you ever suffer physical deformity, allergies, or injuries that made things more difficult for you compared to those with no such setbacks? Did we get our development placed on hold by lockdowns, a poor social circle, prison time, mandatory military service, or other momentum killers? Has your country decided to embrace stupidity and its financial or political workings, and has that impacted your life? These are tough questions. The great news is that God is good. None of the things I've just mentioned can stop you permanently if you can move forward with faith. Some people can have most of these things and still focus on the fundamentals, choose happiness, and build something really beautiful. Now, what I want you to do is revisit those times when you compare yourself with others. If you're ambitious like me, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Picture the 20-year-old who built a business that became worth $100 million, and you're, what, 32? What are you doing with your life? Congratulations if you're that 20-year-old, by the way. This podcast is for you too. This person is what the Koreans call omchina. This is a combination of three words, 엄마, which is mother, 친구, meaning friend, and 아들, meaning son. omchina is your mom's friend's son. Here's an example of what an unhelpful mother might say. Why can't you be like my friend's son? He found a wife at 26 and now he has 4 children. My friend's daughter is in the top 1% of her class and won a violin competition at age 9. Why can't you be like her? The omchina is a person you may never meet, but his or her list of accomplishments is legendary, and probably exaggerated if we're being honest here. But think about that person you compare yourself to, because they are probably just as exaggerated as the Korean omchina when you really think about it. Where did they start on the marathon of life, and where did you start? Should you be expecting the same breaks and successes with the same input of resources, time, and effort as that person if you started 10 miles behind them? No. What breaks did they find that you did not? And don't pay attention to the story the media feeds you about this person if they're famous. If you dig deep, often their humble beginnings are not always as humble as you are led to believe. Let's say you start 10 miles ahead on the marathon of life. You had emotionally healthy parents, an upper middle class life, and are fairly able-bodied except for a few allergies. And you got to go to Princeton. Wow. And you were the only one from your town who made it to Princeton, or any other such school. Comparing yourself to the person whose grandparents and parents attended Princeton, and they own 4 vacation homes and have an airport named after their patriarch, that's hardly fair. That person started 20 miles ahead on the marathon of life. If you get from 10 miles to 20 miles, while the old money college student goes from 20 to 26.2, your accomplishment is 10 versus their 6.2. Now, nobody might celebrate your success, but your success is actually more impressive because of how far you've come. There are some people whose lives are so terrible. If they make it to where they work the day shift at a Ramada Inn near Tampa, Florida, and have decent health, no current addictions, and a healthy circle of 2 friends, that's a huge accomplishment for them. They might have gone from -15 to the 0-mile marker. That's what I see, and I think that's what God sees too, because He sees everyone's lives down to the details. And this can get you endlessly curious about the lives of others. See how far you've traveled based upon where you really started, not from where other people began. And if you find that you've been going in the wrong direction, do you know what that means? It means you have just recently experienced a change in your values. Maybe you were started in that direction without your say-so, but you get to stop it and go the other way. And even if it was all you, the journey is still in your hands. If you're not dead, and the world's not neck-deep in the apocalypse yet, you can live for something better than before. That being said, we have limitations with the time we have. You see, there are some things we get to do, and some things we don't get to do. In the book The Sovereign Individual, a book I will reference very often in this podcast series, I learned about a man named Otto Ammon. In the 1890s, a German economist named Otto Ammon became fascinated with the distribution of ability in society. He would apply this also to status and income. He would take 4 6-sided dice and calculate the likelihood of each possible total score if all 4 dice were rolled and then counted. He calculated that out of 1,296 possible throws of the dice, the lowest number, 4, would happen once. The highest number, 24, would happen once. As we get closer to the middle number, 14, we see the chance of it happening being 146 times. Now, what does a German economist throwing dice have to do with your life? It means there are some things we get to do and some things we don't get to do. There are certain things we don't get to do simply because we aren't going to be the best person for that thing. The pyramid symbolism in pop culture is so prevalent, it lives rent-free in our heads. Occult symbolism aside, we often view hierarchies this way. Lots of people at the very bottom, a few at the top. Ammon's analysis suggests a different shape. The humble turnip. I doubt we'll be able to power level the turnip to the same cultural stature as the pyramid, but I digress. The turnip has a narrow stem above and a narrow root beneath, while the middle is thick, just like Otto Ammon's dice rolling distribution. In some areas, we are actually the shoot on top, and some people have that potential, but don't get to the position where they can use that, as we discussed earlier. And every one of us has an area of our lives where we are, in fact, the root, rolling a 4 and looking absolutely ridiculous. And some people live very well despite being a root in several ways, but their life circumstances prevent them from ever falling that far. There, but for the grace of God, go I. So we all should say. In areas where you're the root and other people aren't, you don't get to do those things, except perhaps as a hobby, temporarily, until you find a more rewarding one. Otto organized each dice to represent different things like intellectual traits, moral traits, economic traits, and bodily traits. He even thought of more than that. Thank God he didn't know about tabletop role-playing games, or he'd be making Dungeons & Dragons-style character sheets for the whole population of 1890s Berlin. There are some things we get to do. We roll high, and we have the right character, skills, and access to those things. Then there are the things we don't get to do either right now or possibly ever, because we don't have the character, skills, or access to those things. By stopping your energy on the things you simply rolled low on, you can put that energy into the things you rolled high on and go further. There are some things we get to do and some things we don't get to do, because we don't have the time or won't justify the time to do them. A friendlier way to look at it is like going on vacation to someplace new. Eventually, you have to return home. even if you didn't get to see everything you wanted. I returned recently from Taiwan, and I highly recommend it in October. But whether I was there 5 days or 5 weeks, the fact of the matter is, there will always be something I may have wanted to do, but didn't have the time to cross it off. As Thomas Sowell says, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. I may have wanted to be a musician at one point, and you know what? If I met the right people, built enough passive income to take care of my family, and decided to devote time to that purpose, I might. It is more likely, however, that I'll be too fascinated with growing things, building my house, taking care of a family, running a business, and reading books about history. And that's okay. We all have things that we don't get to do, either because we're not the best person for the job, or because the yeses we give to something else equal a no for these things. And you can be stubborn like me, and maybe you'll have enough providence, work ethic, and talent to change your path. In some areas I did, and it worked well. I got to teach, build, learn, and live a life of adventure. In those other areas where you aren't willing to let go, maybe being a hobbyist will scratch that itch just enough. By knowing what's really important to you, you can say yes to those things, say no to everything else, and know that you haven't wasted your time. You have a unique experience with some good and some bad, just like anyone. This keeps you from freezing up and not going anywhere on the marathon of life. There's some things you get to do and some things you don't get to do. Seth Godin made an amazing book a few decades back called The Dip. The dip is the long chasm between beginner and mastery that often is not very fun. To get good at anything, to truly know what you're doing, it takes a while. If you realize the effort isn't worth it, maybe it is time to quit those things. Remember that winners never quit, applied as a blanket statement, is terrible advice. Kids quit wetting the bed. Adults quit going to businesses that keep raising their prices without improving their services. The elderly quit partying all night and training at ninja school. Vaguely, winners never quit is helpful, like never quit investing, never stop taking care of your health. But we can quit investing in things that don't make money so we can invest in things that do. We can stop eating things that are bad for us and find healthier, more delicious alternatives. And we can devote our time, energy, and money towards the things we can truly be the best at. There are some things we do get to do, because the effort to get to the other side is worth it. Then there are things we don't get to do because we decide the effort to get through the dip isn't worth it to us. The more you can decide which dips to enter and the conditions under which you would quit before entering them, the more likely you are to be confident in your choices, not be swayed by how you feel on any individual day, and push through to the other side of one worth getting through. Finally, some things we get to do and other things we don't get to do. And that is because it's just not in the cards. This statement, it flies in the face of the story I try to tell myself every day, but sometimes it's unavoidable. Some people have the ability, and this is a skill in itself, to overcome multiple long odds in a row and do the highly unlikely again and again. But even these people with reality distortion fields run into brick walls sometimes. Even Steve Jobs gets pancreatic cancer. To illustrate in a very actionable way what I mean by it's just not in the cards, let me borrow from business author James Altucher, who explained an idea he called the conspiracy number. James Altucher, in his book Skip the Line, introduces a filter for ideas. James Altucher suggests using the conspiracy number. The conspiracy number can be explained by just one question. How many things have to conspire to make this a good idea? For example, let's say your goal is to start a fashion brand. But what would need to happen for you to truly do this and be successful? For one thing, you would need a talented designer or team. And if the designer is you, add an extra conspiracy number, because you would need to be born with that talent and have both the temperament to get good at it and the training to get at that level. The second thing you need is a manufacturer or tailor who can produce samples and is willing to do so at your budget. Number 3, a social media content strategist or influencer friend willing to promote what you design so other people will want it. Fourth, a contact in retail or luxury marketing to get your product into stores so it can sell. They would have to like what you've made, see a market for it, decide that your influencer or others like them fit that market, and ultimately say yes to it. And 5, most importantly, people would need to buy it, and at volumes high enough that you can keep going with the process next season. So, to start a major fashion brand, your conspiracy number is 5 at least. Now imagine you're trying to become a CPA. You would need 1, enough of an ability to understand accounting and taxes to do the work. Basically someone to teach and mentor you. 2, enough hours of experience to qualify for the state licensing requirements, including the college credits, and at the end there's usually a licensing exam which you would have to pass. And 3, find people willing to hire you for the work. That's a conspiracy number of 3. You'll notice that the rewards of things with high conspiracy numbers tend to be higher, but also are more difficult to achieve. So if your family already has CPAs in it, then your conspiracy number might even be 1 or 2, if you have the temperament for the work. Every extra conspiracy number is a sticking point, a place where you can stall out and get stuck. Being a CPA isn't as glamorous as being the next Tom Ford. However, if you're not in a position to easily access any of those 5 things required to succeed in fashion design, then you might find that being not stuck and having 10 to 15 years instead of positive momentum and a growing investment portfolio might be pretty glamorous after all. There are 2 ways I've found to reduce the conspiracy number for everything you do, but they tend to require intense amounts of time and commitment and radical unselfishness. The first is to build a platform, which requires helping lots and lots of people by sharing ideas, being entertaining, or imparting skills that can help them. The second is by growing your family's 9 forms of capital, so that other people in your family can access all those things more easily. And of course, both of those things have conspiracy numbers as well, which we can get into in a future episode. To wrap all this up, we are on a marathon towards sustainable success. We are all at different points. We start in different places. By recognizing where we've actually started and how far we've come, it gives us perspective, humility, and patience with ourselves. You won't be unfairly comparing yourself with others, whether they are a world-famous mogul or the mythical mom's friend's son, the Omchina. That reduction in mental pressure is a dividend that comes from knowing the truth about reality, which makes you more likely to move forward with peace of mind. There are other things we can do to better move forward on the marathon of life. The first is to set healthy boundaries so that other people don't take resources that you would not voluntarily offer to give. The second thing is the price of knowing the truth, which is why some people reject it. The price is recognizing that there are some things we don't get to do, but also some things we get to do. At the end of the day, we don't get to do a lot of things, because we aren't at the top of Otto Ammon's turnip for those things. We rolled low and aren't the best person for the job, either because we lack the skills, the character, or the access. We can solve some of these things with money and time, but there are limitations. By choosing to do things we roll high for, or the things we at least roll high enough for, we make more effective use of our talents. By choosing to say yes to the things that are important to us, we recognize that we are saying no to the things that are less important, and we can move forward with fewer regrets. By acknowledging which dips are just not worth the effort for the payoff, we can choose dips that are worth getting through. Furthermore, we can establish parameters for quitting before we start that journey, so we don't get caught in a sunk cost trap if those parameters get met at some point in our journey. And finally, we need to realize that every dream and ambition we have has a conspiracy number. The higher the conspiracy number, the higher the rewards usually, but there's also a lower likelihood of success, and each number is a place where you can really get stuck for months or years. Finding the places which, for you, the conspiracy number is small will give you greater momentum. Personally, I'd recommend choosing a conspiracy number large enough to challenge you based on where you are on the marathon of life, but small enough that you have a 60 to 80% chance of success. This not only allows you to dream bigger, it also expands the contacts, resources, and diversity of your family's wealth. Unless instead you're working in the family business, in which case you can use the extra time to build these skills and find applications for them to improve that business. And if you fail, try something new that has a lower conspiracy number, then use that momentum and increased resources from that to try again if that first goal was really important to you. This will be a difficult conversation to have with a family if you start criticizing other people's goals. So don't do that. Rather, let this podcast serve as a way for people to trip on the truth. Even if they don't understand it all now, it will click later in life. I recommend this podcast be discussed with your family wealth group only. The members of your family or social circle you either listen to this podcast with or talk about it with. Ask them some questions. You can ask any questions you want, but some questions you can ask include, where did you start on the marathon of life? Was it 10 miles past 0, 20, -5, and where do you think you are now? 2. Has there been anything that served as a setback, moving you back on the line rather than forward? 3. Have you ever made unfair comparisons between yourself and other successful people? 4. Are there people among your family and friends who made a lot of progress in their lives but are not celebrated for their accomplishments because they are not at the 26.2-mile point? How can we recognize those people better? 5. Are there things you are trying to do that you might not get to do? This can be either because you aren't in a position to do those things, they aren't worth it, you'd rather spend your time differently, or the conspiracy number is just too high. 6. For your elders, has anyone in our family history changed their goals because their previous goal had too many difficulties on the way? 7. How has your understanding about the marathon of life changed the way you think about your journey and the journeys your family members are taking? Until then, I'll see you in the next episode. I hope you make progress on the marathon of life, and remember, the struggles you face today, you not only can solve, but you can solve for the generations that come after you. Join the Substack for more information, including the questions I asked at the end of this podcast, links to resources I just talked about, such as books, a GPT prompt about the conspiracy number, and more. If joining the Substack isn't for you yet, you can still support this podcast by giving it a review, subscribing wherever you're listening to it, and sharing this podcast with people you want to have these kinds of conversations with.